Final Resolution is estimated to be doing 25,000 to 28,000 buys on its original live run, most likely both due to word of mouth and because they pushed the replay hard on television. Because Dave notes that notes that Turning Point particularly got a big boost in replay buys, probably based off the strength of the Triple X AMW cage match in particular. But he even suggests that like no company in the history of wrestling seems to have done like a larger proportion of their pay-per-view buys on replay than TNA has done. So there's a lot of like strong word of mouth coming out of these shows, driving buys and kind of the days after the show.
It's probably a lot of people who maybe didn't even know about TNA, but then have heard all the hype surrounding these big moments and are like, well, let's go give it a shot.
Yeah, and it is at the moment, like, I think that they're tone align, but they're doing, I think, a good job of balancing having the likes of Styles and AMW front and center, while also having the likes of Hall and Nash and DDP and Piper for a while, and those kind of legacy stars who still have at least enough to add that they're productive parts of the show, without the show being entirely about them.
I think they're having a really strong pay-per-view run, but they need to have better impacts to pair with it.
Well, it's interesting you say that. Like the numbers for Impact are doing pretty darn good too. TNA Impact on its premiere on Fridays, as we mentioned last month, it moved from 3 p.m. to 4 p.m. So it did a 0.19 on the 7th and 0.27 on the 14th of January. And that's above what they were doing. There's some shows later in the month that did some of their best numbers ever on television. So coming off of the pay-per-view, they did on the 21st, they did a 0.32, and on the 22nd on the replay, they did a 0.33, because we mentioned they have a midnight replay, I think it was as well. So it seems like the numbers are very strong for Impact at the moment. They're on the up.
If this were a 2023, they'd be getting $1 billion when their renewal came up.
Yeah, which I guess it kind of happened in 2005, but we'll get to that later in the year. So, like, it's funny, there's some hand-wringing about Dusty this month. And when then you're like, well, the TV is doing close to record numbers, if not record numbers. Some of that is a better time slot, but listen, that's what they've given them under Dusty's regime. The pay-per-views are doing above average, and I think the most important thing is they're not trailing off in terms of numbers. Like, people expected the first one to do well. It did about 35,000. And then the second one also worked its way up to roughly 35,000 based on word of mouth. And Dave expects Final Resolution to get to roughly the same. So, like, business is doing pretty well under Dusty. And then there's some, like, is he doing a good job? It's like, well, he kind of is.
Well, they don't seem to be scaring off anyone. The same amount of people seem to be coming in, and then more people for TV. So, I don't know. Perhaps it's just there's an element of, I could be doing this better from certain people in the company who perhaps owned it at one point.
Who were perhaps ousted from the book, but months ago. Maybe, do you think there is a little bit of like, I laid the ground, it's not true, but a little bit of, in his mind, I laid the groundwork and now he's like getting the fruits of my labor, even though like the shows are just better. Like that's also a thing. Like the pay-per-views are very good, and there's a lot, we were talking, if you go and listen to us on Patreon, tnachat.com, listen to our end of year awards, we worked out that there was like 400 matches from TNA in 2004, and like 5 of them were 3 3/4 stars or higher.
It was not a good hit rate.
We already have, I believe, more of in the year 2005 when we're still only in February.
We almost had more of them on one pay-per-view.
Yeah, there was probably more top-tier matches on Final Resolution than there was on the entirety of 2004 TNA.
Yeah. I think part of it is that in wrestling, a lot of people just want to be the boss. And a lot of people want to have that responsibility. So no matter how well someone in that position is going to be doing it, there's always going to be like this inner working, backstabbing, I want to be the guy.
I was about to say the words, I don't think we get that anymore. But then I look at the World Wrestling Entertainment and there seems to be a very large incident of pretty much the exact same thing happening. Or the dude who was put in charge from the person ousted is doing as good if not better a job, and the person ousted is trying to get his way back in.
Yeah, so I guess the only difference is there that the ratings didn't go up.
Well, they kind of did for a while.
Well, but that wasn't so much the quality of show. That was, hey, wonder if things are going to change.
And then you got Johnny Gargano for like 2 weeks.
And then he was like off TV for like 4 weeks.
And now he's injured. It's weird. I don't know what's happening in that company. I watched because I was going to Clash at the Castle anyway.
And you watched it as a bit, because you wanted to be the guy who was like, oh, you know, I'm Paul Lyd, baby. Triple H has saved the World Wrestling Federation. Things are great.
I was doing the Paul Lyd stuff as a bit, but like the main reason I was watching is because I was going to Clash at the Castle, and there was like the actual intrigue of like, well, will it look different? And there's people who like, it never looked different. It did. It was a little bit better, but not a lot better.
Yeah, but it went from like a 5 to a 6. Like,
I would say it went from a 4 to a 6, which is the same place it was, but it was worse.
Well, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for my ridiculous, insane statement.
But I say that for a reason, though, because it was substantially better than it was. Like there was a noticeable improvement.
Substantially is a hell of a word.
Well, because it's, as I said, we agree where it was. We agree it was both a 6. I'm arguing it came from like a 2 or 3 rather than like a 5.
Okay, I'll change my answer. It went from like a 2 to a 5.
How dare you lower it to a 5? So now I have to argue up to a 6. But like it got better is my point. It did get better, and there's people who pretended it didn't.
It got very slightly better.
I was going to Clash at the Castle, so I was like, I should watch the TV, and it was pretty good.
You were like, I'm going to spend all this money to go to this show. I'm gonna pretend that it's good, so I don't feel like I've wasted my money.
Yeah, and that show was pretty good. It did have Sheamus and Gunther, which did make my match of the year ballot. So
it had my man Solo Sikoa debuting. So.
Oh yeah, and I couldn't tell who he was. I was far too far away.
Where were you in the building?
Oh god, like fucking! I paid far too much money for very bad seats. I just don't want to talk about it. They weren't very bad seats, but it's like, you know, in an 80,000 seat stadium, anything other than like 5 rows in, you're basically watching screens and soaking in atmosphere.
Did you pop big for the old Drew theme?
Yes, and like that match was really good live. I haven't watched it back, but like that crowd fucking desperately wanted Drew to win, so that did help.
I didn't love it, but. That's a me thing where I don't necessarily love the big WWE epic style. It just doesn't connect with me very much.
You did have Sheamus and Gunther, which I said was match of the year level for me, and there was the lovely moment at the end where Sheamus got his little standing ovation, which is very nice.
That was a great match.
I can't even remember what sent. Oh, Jarrett sent us off on Paul.
Yeah.
But moral of the story, numbers are up. Pay-per-view's doing well, Impact's doing pretty well, the new time slot's doing well, and the replay's doing well.